another Elders Roundtable. As we continue our discussion on marriage, we wanted to talk a little bit about advice for those who are engaged, couples who are pursuing marriage, those who are newlyweds, and even just people still kind of finding their way, those who are young in marriage. I know each of you men has been a gift to me and to our marriage. What would be some of your advice for those kind of young couples, those just getting into marriage? Maybe they have a theological understanding of what marriage is, but practically speaking, how would you counsel them as they begin to find their footing in marriage?
I heard a really wise man recently talk about the importance of forgiveness in marriage and how often that just the ability to recognize that you're going to be hurt, you're going to hurt, and you can let that go. Again, Ephesians 5, what does Christ do when you do that to him? What is his response to you? And then you go, okay, what is then your response to your wife? Practically speaking, that's difficult. We run off the rails with that a lot, and we get hurt. Just like in the church, conflict resolution is a huge ministry, much more in marriage. So for young couples, to face that reality, to test your ability to forgive consistently in the courtship process, to face that one boldly, I guess, be some good advice. What else rings for? What would you tell your daughter? What would you tell your son?
Well, I think just remember that you both are in process, you're both growing, you both have weak points. We fall into this thing when we're dating. I think we have an ideal picture. You got to live up to that ideal. What's wrong? You're not what I would like you to be, or I'd like you to change into be. Doesn't work well. We got enough to think about with ourselves. So just patience is one thing, and we're on the way. The other thing is studying the Word together, obviously going to church together and talking about what's being said and growing that together. If you share those things, that gives you, I think, a big advantage over people that don't have that.
It's huge. So. I wonder how many Christian couples, if you sat a husband down and said, what passages would you go to if I asked you about biblical marriage? How many Christian men would be able to take you to Ephesians 5, 1 Peter 3, Colossians 3, walk you through biblical passages, jump back to Genesis 2. It's huge, knowing the scriptures and how specifically God has designed marriage. It's that whole thing about expectations that we were talking about. If you go into marriage with the wrong expectations, you're in for some trouble.
I would also just say practically, on a regular basis, talk about money, finances.
Great.
Do that early.
Great.
Don't
Huge.
avoid it. Avoiding it will not work. It will not help. And just right away, and do it regularly.
Yeah.
If you can be on the same page with that too, again, a scriptural view of that, but find a good resource, Dave Ramsey or something, to help with that and get on that early. I think that would be helpful.
It's good, yeah.
Lynn has talked about the kind of the throwdown culture that we're in, or the throwaway culture that we're in, and you read biblically, this is it. There isn't another out. There isn't an option. This is the one you're going to be with, and to grasp that and go in knowing that there are no side doors.
Right.
Excuse me. Or at least when you're counseling with young people, it's like, do you feel that way? Do you think if it doesn't, what happens? You could maybe bait them. What happens if this doesn't work out in 6 months, and see what they say? Because the biblical response is, it doesn't matter. We're in this to accept that reality and live that. Again, Ephesians 5. Jesus has no plan B for the church. There's no out. He's with us forever.
Yeah.
And that's the same picture we have, but that may not be widely held societally or even in the church as it should be for us.
Yeah. Andrew, you and I were talking the other day about premarital counseling, what kinds of things you would include in premarital counseling. Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
When you think through, what are the things that, if you sit down with a couple, we're going to do 5 weeks of premarital, what things do you want them to learn, to know, to understand, to grasp before they step into marriage?
Yeah, just a number of topics come to mind. Discipleship, conflict resolution, how do you argue? We go through Ephesians 5, but some things that lead to conflict or can be temptations toward conflict is what you mentioned, Dave, money, intimacy, and also in-laws. To know, you know,
family.
Are you
That comes up in marriage?
once in a while, yeah. Are you expecting that we will be at your parents' home every Christmas? You want to get all that out,
Yep.
because there are leave and cleave issues, and this is now. I tell couples this a lot. You're more the other person's spouse than you are your father's son now. You know, you're still your father's son. You're
Mhm.
still, those still exist, but you're more your spouse's spouse. That's
Yeah.
the new relationship
You're now
that is primary. for
more
you.
of a husband than you are a son.
Yes. So there are a lot of issues that come up. So because those are oftentimes the ones that cause problems, hearing a couple flesh out some of, you know, where they kind of don't see eye to eye is good before marriage happens, so that
Yeah.
you can do that. And this goes to discipleship. I've talked about this before. You always want to have another couple knowing about your marriage. The lady can go to another lady, the husband can go to another husband, and that they can help you with that. But you want to kind of get some of those tough conversations before marriage, because you want to know how to resolve conflict. And here's what I'll say. One thing we ask in premarital is, what is your soon-to-be spouse's, what are the two biggest sins they struggle with the most? And, you know, they walk into our home and there's dessert and Michelle's got it all beautiful and they're holding hands and they're like, this is going to be wonderful. And we're like, what sin does he struggle with the most? What? And they're like, you know,
Get real.
but it's good because you're going to be dealing with those the whole time. And,
Yep.
and I don't want to put a damper on it. I want to bring reality to it and
Yep.
say, how can this thrive now? And so that teaches them that you're marrying someone who's fallen and is going to disappoint you. And if you can expect that, but be willing to go and love him through that, love her through that, build them up, forgive them, encourage them to grow more in the image of Christ. That's romantic. That's
Mhm.
sweet.
Mhm.
But when it's, you let me down, you shouldn't let me down, I'm angry, there's no romance there. So the reality helps the romance,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
So I think, and the final thing I'd say is, in conflict resolution, because you're trying to help another sinner grow into the image of Christ, and you admit, I need that too, and you're going to be the chief person to help me with that,
Mhm.
the goal of conflict resolution isn't to be right. So husbands and wives, when they fight, the goal is not be right, because then the conflict keeps going for
Mhm.
days and days and days
Mhm.
and years.
Trying to figure out who's right.
Yeah, the goal is reconciliation and forgiveness. I'm not saying avoid the truth. We're not going to talk about the argument, let's just hold hands and everything's fine. I'm not saying that. You have to work it out. But when you are trying to resolve the conflict, here's how you're going to do it. The man is going to say, instead of, I'm right here, you're wrong here, the man is going to say, here's how I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that to you that way. I shouldn't have done. The woman's going to say the same thing. I shouldn't have said that. I discouraged you. And so when you're trying to resolve it, you're being humble and confessing sin, and that causes the other person to want, because they love you, to forgive that and draw you close,
Mhm.
and we'll get through this, you know. And
Mhm.
really, it was really dumb what we were talking about, but we do love each other, and so
Yeah.
the goal is reconciliation out of love, and you'll get through the truth there. But
Conflict resolution's huge.
too many people point fingers in marriage, and they should be pointing it back.
Yeah.
Here's where I erred. Here's where you erred. I still think this. I still think that. Let's talk about that. But I shouldn't have done it. So, long answer, but
Yeah.
I kind of did
Good answer.
a package of
Good answer.
premarital counseling.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and because on the other side of that is, when you get in a dispute or your spouse sins against you, there's just the reality of, how do I deal with the fact that I've been sinned against?
Yeah.
You know, and too many of us, it's just, you know, you put up the wall of defense, or, you know,
You
you
withdraw.
have that
Well, yes.
smoldering
Yeah.
bitterness
You
in your
owe me it.
heart.
My
That's right.
vindication.
Yep.
all those thoughts at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yep. And instead,
Yes.
what we have to do is, knowing that, you know, apart from our own righteousness, God has justified us before Him. And in the same sense, when Pastor said, we bend out our justification to our spouse. So it's like, I look at my spouse and say, you're not perfect, but I'm willing to treat you with love and kindness, even though you've sinned against me, willing to extend forgiveness towards you, even though you don't deserve it any more than I do from the Lord. Yet he's given it to me, willing to bend that out towards you.
So a lot of this sounds like the gospel.
That's right.
We preach the gospel to ourselves often enough and look to that on a regular basis. It's all about forgiveness. The other thing connected to the gospel is, as Christians, Jesus said, if you're going to come after me, deny yourself. And what we're talking about here is kind of denying yourself.
That's right.
I'm not. It doesn't have to be about my vindication or what I want. It's
Great.
I'm thinking of you and denying myself in humility with that. So.
As husbands, we have to lead with that. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
Yeah.
Yep. A husband and a wife dies every day.
There you go.
Dies to their way, their desire. Other things are more important.
When you see that work well, it's beautiful.
It is
isn't it?
beautiful.